The stars beyond Echelon Prime were beautiful in their silence. Uncaring, ancient, eternal. Rafael Lin stood in the observation dome of the command tower, watching them glitter like cold jewels on velvet. From this vantage, the galaxy seemed distant and peaceful. A lie, he thought. The soft chime of a proximity alert broke his reverie. He didn't flinch. General Lin, came the voice of Commander Hesper from the console below. Message from Fleetcom. Zhurak fleet confirmed en route. Estimated arrival, 11 days. Lin didn't speak at first. He let the information settle in the room like dust. Everyone already knew. This was merely confirmation that the shadow looming over Echelon Prime had a name, and it was Zhurak. He descended the spiral steps from the dome, boots clinking against metal. A hologram bloomed in the center of the war room, a projection of a system, with Echelon Prime glowing at its heart. The neutral zone, once a promise of peaceful expansion, now marked the edge of storm. How many ships? Lin asked. 73 confirmed signatures, sir, Hesper replied. Heavy carriers, destroyers, and a dreadnought-class flagship. Lin raised a brow. That many for us? We believe they're sending a message. Not just to us. To Earth. To everyone. He studied the hologram. The sheer scale of the Zhurak fleet made their intent unmistakable. This wasn't diplomacy. It was domination. Echelon Prime had been colonized less than a decade ago, one of Earth's bold pushes into neutral space. The planet had been little more than a mining hub and a science outpost. But its position made it strategic, too close to Zhurak-controlled sectors for comfort. Apparently, someone on Earth hadn't considered how a proud, war-forged Imperium might react. And now, the storm had come. Let's assume, Lin said slowly, that no reinforcements are coming. He could feel the air shift in the room. The silence was heavy. Sir, Hesper asked cautiously. Earth is stretched thin, he continued. The Senate will debate. The military will hesitate. By the time they act, this will be over. So let's operate under the assumption that Echelon Prime stand alone. Hesper nodded, though the tension in her jaw betrayed her fear. Understood. Lin moved to the center of the room. I want a full asset report in 2 hours. I don't care if it's classified, buried, or forgotten. I want every weapon system, every prototype, every piece of junk in orbit. Civilian satellites, mining drones, station husks. If it floats in space, I want to know about it. You're planning a defense? One of the officers asked. I'm planning a misdirection, Lin replied. The Zhurak don't just outgun us. They overwhelm us. So if they're expecting a traditional fight, we'll give them something else. He tapped a control, shifting the hologram to a closer view of the planet's orbit. This is not a battlefield, he said. This is a trap. The armory was a museum of compromises. The planet's defense force had always been more symbolic than practical. A dozen patrol ships, mostly retrofitted freighters with railguns bolted onto their hulls. 2 missile batteries in low orbit. A decommissioned space station converted into a communications relay. Lin toured each in person, accompanied by a small drone assistant that cataloged everything he saw. He ran his hand along the carbon-scorched flank of a half-operational interceptor. Its targeting system hadn't been calibrated in 5 years. Still, he marked it down as usable. Echelon Prime didn't have warships. It had parts, debris, ghosts. But Lin knew that war wasn't always about strength. It was about perception, and the Zhurak, proud and ancient, believed themselves invincible. That was their weakness. We have 4 defunct mining platforms in polar orbit, Hesper reported later. No weapons, but structurally intact. Could be converted. Do it. Load them with anything that burns, explodes, or radiates. Then give them false heat signatures. Make them look like missile nests. Sir, with respect, we don't have enough power to make it convincing. Then we steal it. Gut every luxury module on the surface. Drain city grids if we have to. Civilians will understand. They would, he hoped. By the end of the day, the war room had transformed into a hive of activity. Engineers and tacticians clustered around terminals, overlaying the orbital map with new data, junk fields reclassified as minefields, dead stations marked for reanimation. The atmosphere was electric with desperation. And yet, for the first time since the Zhurak fleet had been detected, people moved with purpose. That night, Lin walked alone through the city's upper dome. The sky above was a gradient of stars and faint auroras. Far in the distance, a child pointed upward at a passing shuttle, unaware of what was coming. He envied that innocence. He sat on a bench overlooking a hydroponics park. Plants glowed gently in bioluminescent hues. There was something fragile and beautiful about the way this colony had grown, imperfect but hopeful. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Raphael. He turned. A woman approached, Dr. Mira Talos, the lead science officer and an old acquaintance from Earth Academy. She wore a lab coat over her civilian clothes, and her expression was somewhere between concern and curiosity. "You're up late," she said, sitting beside him. "So are you. I heard you're gutting the satellites. We'll put them back." She smiled faintly. "You always were good at breaking things to make something better." Lin's eyes stayed on the sky. "I'm trying to turn trash into a defense system. Not exactly textbook. No, but it's very you." She studied him for a moment. "You think we can win this?" He didn't answer immediately. "I think," he said, "we can make them regret coming here. And sometimes that's more important." At 0300 hours, Lin stood before the Defense Council for final approval. They weren't military brass, just scientists, engineers, civic leaders. But they trusted him. He laid out the plan in full. Create the illusion of a fully armed orbital defense network using misdirection, hack signals, automated drones, and false data. Bait the Zhurak into overcommitting. Stretch their supply lines. Break them not through force, but frustration. "This isn't war," he said. "It's theater. And if we perform well enough, the audience dies confused." The room was silent. Then Hesper stood. "Permission to begin staging operations?" Lin nodded once. Granted. The trap was set. The first act of the war had begun. And far across the void, the Zhurak fleet burned toward Echelon Prime, ready to write history in fire, unaware that they were walking straight into a masterpiece of misdirection. The Zhurak fleet breached the system's outer edge 3 days ahead of schedule. A ripple of distorted space, a flare of drive signatures, and then they emerged, 73 warships silhouetted against the dying light of a red dwarf star. Their arrival was neither stealthy nor subtle. It was a statement. The Zhurak didn't need surprise. They were the surprise. From the command tower on Echelon Prime, the fleet looked like a swarm of polished obsidian daggers, cutting through space with casual menace. Their flagship, the VA Korthar, anchored the formation, a dreadnought over 6 kilometers long, bristling with graviton lances, plasma batteries, and hangar bays like cavernous moss. General Lin watched from the holodable, arms folded, face unreadable. "They want us to see them," said Hesper. "They're broadcasting an open frequency, imperial anthem, war declarations, tactical posturing." Lin almost smiled. Pride makes noise. The enemy's first action was not a missile, but a broadcast, a deep, baritone voice with a tone like polished stone and venom. "You who have trespassed into sovereign Zhurak space, know this. Mercy is not your right. It is a gift, one we do not give lightly. Surrender your world. Abandon your orbitals. Submit to Imperium rule, or be extinguished." Lin leaned over the console. Record a reply. He didn't raise his voice, didn't sneer or scowl. He simply stared into the lens. "To the Zhurak Imperium. We acknowledge your message and decline." He ended the transmission. The first barrage came hours later. High-orbit bombardment designed not to strike targets, but to test defenses. Blinding flashes of green-white plasma tore across space, targeting orbital relays and satellites. Many were already offline, moved or sabotaged by Lin's tech teams to appear destroyed. Mining drones, gutted and reprogrammed, exploded convincingly under enemy fire, sending satisfying debris clouds across the stars. The Zhurak believed they were clearing a path. In reality, they were being herded. "All units, Phase 1 is active," Lin ordered. "Begin shaping the battlefield." On the dark side of the planet, near the wreckage of a decommissioned cargo ring, a fleet of converted maintenance drones activated their falsified transponders. From a distance, they read as a formation of light combat frigates. A Zhurak scout wing picked up the signal and diverted course to intercept. As they closed in, the drones scattered, emitting coded energy pulses mimicking a retreating squad. The Zhurak, eager to chase a kill, followed them deeper into the gravity shadow of Echelon Prime, directly into the drift field. The drift field was a collection of abandoned station cores, slagged hulls, and inactive reactor modules, a junk belt left over from Echelon's early industrial boom. To most, it was useless space debris. To Lin, it was a chessboard, and the pieces were rigged to explode. The first Zhurak scout ship didn't even realize it had entered a minefield. A gravitic trap, cobbled from old survey beacons, triggered a chain of detonations. 3 ships vanished in plasma fire. The rest turned back, scattering into evasive patterns. That's when the real ambush began. Lin's team had hidden automated turrets in old or haulers, slave to optical and thermal tracking. They opened fire in a blistering cross pattern, cutting down anything that moved. The Zhurak scout commander's last transmission was a confused snarl of static and fire. 14 enemy vessels down, Hesper reported. Minimal loss on our side. Decoys mostly. Good, Lin replied. Now we make it worse. Phase 2 commenced. Saturation jamming, ghost signals, and synthetic heat blooms. The orbital map lit up with a dozen new targets, all fake. From sensor readings, it appeared that Echelon Prime had just deployed a second, hidden fleet. In the Zhurak war room aboard the VA Core, Thar, Fleet Master Col Varn stared at the projections in growing irritation. His massive, four-armed frame loomed over the tactical table, tusked jaw grinding. This is deception, he growled in his native tongue. But they show power signatures, one of his adjutants protested. Weapon capacitors, thermal spikes. They are lying. Varn pounded the table with a fist, cracking the edge. Humans are cowards. They twist reality to hide their fear. Still, the data could not be ignored. The enemy positions seemed to shift, move, even attack. Zhurak squad sent to investigate found wrecks, traps, or nothing at all. Varn ordered a full-spectrum scan, electronic warfare protocols, AI-assisted recon. But Echelon Prime had masked its real positions behind layered interference and heat bleed camouflage. Every scan revealed a different pattern. Nothing made sense. The war of misdirection was working. Back on Echelon Prime, Lin entered the war room to the scent of stale coffee and scorched wiring. Engineers were rerouting power across the orbital grid manually. A group of techs was arguing over which signal to spoof next. "How's morale?" Lin asked quietly. Hesper, sitting at a flickering console, gave a tired shrug. "People are exhausted, but they believe in the plan. You gave them purpose." Lin nodded, though his own shoulders felt heavier by the hour. "Zhurak are frustrated," Hesper continued. "They're firing blind now, launching probes, sweeping random arcs. We'll make them waste more," Lin said. "Trigger one of the false command signals. Make it look like we're shifting fleet assets toward the southern hemisphere. Then prep kill zones in the north. That'll split their next strike." Exactly. It was 4D chess, layers upon layers of misinformation, with just enough truth buried inside to be dangerous. Every decoy moved like it had intent. Every signal felt urgent. And every death the Zhurak suffered came not from brute force, but from believing the wrong thing at the wrong time. Late that night, Lin walked the edge of the launch pads, overlooking the orbital elevator. Stars shimmered above, but he wasn't watching them. He was watching the lights of Echelon Prime below. So many people, farmers, technicians, families, sleeping beneath the looming shadow of annihilation. And yet they endured. Mira joined him again. This time she held a thermos of hot tea, which she offered wordlessly. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "I haven't." She sat beside him. "We're holding them off. You're making this work." "For now," Lin said. "But every move we make is a gamble. Eventually, they'll stop trusting their scans. They'll stop hesitating. They'll burn everything just to be sure. Mira took a sip of tea. Then we make sure that when they do, they're already too broken to finish the job. Lin looked at her. You should have been a general. She smiled faintly. No, I just know what you're willing to risk. The Zhurak Imperium had come for a conquest. What they'd found instead was a ghost fleet, a maze of illusions, and a commander who fought not with strength, but with shadows. And Echelon Prime, against all odds, was still standing. The war was no longer being fought by ships and guns. It was being fought by echoes, illusions, and phantoms in the dark. Inside the depths of Echelon Prime's primary comms hub, beneath a mountain bunker carved into the volcanic cliffs of Sector 9, a team of 20 specialists worked in synchronized chaos. Engineers, code breakers, cyber warfare experts, and a few reformed hackers with less than official credentials all stared into glowing screens, manipulating the invisible threads of the battle above. At the heart of it stood Azael Rin, a wiry, sharp-eyed signal intelligence officer with a knack for reading code like it was poetry. Her fingers danced across a virtual interface, rerouting signal pings through a web of orbital reflectors and false relays. They're trying to ping our surface batteries again, she muttered. Same protocol sweep as last time. Feed them the junk pattern, said Jace, a former black market slicer turned military consultant. Give him just enough power bleed to make it look like a charging railgun. Azael grinned. Oh, I'll even add a thermal bloom. Make it spicy. Moments later, from 3,000 kilometers away, a Zhurak recon cruiser fired a precision strike at what it believed to be a prime weapons platform. It struck a hollowed-out water tank wrapped in reactor shielding foil. Boom, Jace whispered, making an exploding gesture with his fingers. Up in the war room, General Lin monitored the progression of the enemy's movements across a projected map. Colored arcs showed search patterns, presumed engagement zones, and delayed drift from sensor interference. The map looked chaotic, but to Lin, it was symphonic. They're probing with more caution now, Hesper said, sending single units to verify targets before moving in force. Good, Lin said. That's slower. Slower gives us time. But time was the one thing they had less of with every passing hour. The Zhurak fleet might have been misdirected, but it wasn't idle. They'd begun deploying signal drones of their own, autonomous AI scouts that could learn, adapt, and self-correct errors in battlefield data. That was the beginning of Phase 3. Patch me through to Azael, Lin ordered. A moment later, the bunker's hollow display shimmered, and Azael's image flickered into view. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her hair pulled back in a knot, but her voice was steady. We see them, she said before Lin even spoke. 5 Scout AIs launched for VA Corridor. They're not broadcasting like the others. No baseline data loops, just absorption and vectoring. Stealth recon, Lin said. They're not trying to learn what we are. They're trying to watch us make a mistake. Exactly. Can you corrupt them? Azael's brow furrowed. Depends how deep their machine learning matrix is. If they're using a linked consensus model, we might be able to poison the stream. Feed them bad conclusions. Do it. Make it subtle. I'll need something real to fake. They're smart enough to know the difference between a noise cloud and a tactical error. Lin smiled faintly. Then let's give them a real mistake. 2 hours later, the Zhurak fleet detected a catastrophic systems failure aboard one of Echelon Prime's orbital defense batteries, Unit 37A. It vented power irregularly, released garbled transmission bursts, and began turning erratically in its orbit, as though its guidance system was fried. Zhurak analysts flagged the anomaly as a possible opportunity, a compromised defense point, likely vulnerable to a fast strike. Fleet Master Varn was skeptical. They've faked breakdowns before, he growled. It could be another baited trap. AI scouts confirm the error is authentic, an adjutant replied. No apparent external manipulation. If it is a deception, it is deeply layered. Then burn it. No boarding. Just eliminate. A trio of Zhurak cruisers moved in to destroy Unit 37A. They never came back, because Unit 37 as apparent power venting was a backscatter echo, manufactured by 3 modified reactor modules buried in the station's core. As soon as the enemy ships reached weapons range, the station's core erupted, not in failure, but in a focused electromagnetic pulse strong enough to fry every ship's internal systems. 3 ships, dead in space, hulls intact but ghosted. EM minefield success, Azael reported. Scouts have pulled back. They're recalibrating. Hesper grinned. We just made their AI doubt its own eyes. For every ship that dared approach Echelon Prime, Lin had laid out a dozen micro-deceptions. Drones disguised as emergency beacons. Propulsion flares simulating launches. Reflected laser signals bouncing off orbital junk, mimicking squad communications. But the real masterpiece was Mira Talos' latest contribution. From her subterranean lab, she and her team had reprogrammed a planet-mapping satellite into a full-spectrum holographic projector. It wasn't capable of full stealth field generation, but it could create the illusion of motion, a ghost fleet that shimmered across high orbit, occasionally interacting with the debris field to sell the lie. To Zhurak's sensors, the pattern appeared chaotic, but when filtered through predictive modeling, it mimicked an organized defense formation, one that constantly shifted and seemed just out of reach. What are we calling this one? Lin asked during a late-night check-in. Mira didn't hesitate. The Mirage Net. Fitting, the Mirage Net became the linchpin of Lin's deception strategy. It fooled thermal, electromagnetic, and even low-grade gravimetric sensors. Zhurak strike wings wasted hours attempting to flank it, only to find more debris, or worse, trap-laden kill boxes. Azael kept the system mobile, feeding it behavioral quirks, patterns that were human enough to seem real, but just flawed enough to sow doubt in enemy algorithms. The Zhurak's powerful AI battlefield processors began to splinter. One scout ship returned corrupted. Another never came back. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just a distraction now. It was hunting them. Still, the strain was growing. The comms bunker lost power twice due to overload. Azael had to rotate her team in 4-hour shifts to keep them functional. Myra's holograms began drawing more energy than projected, forcing a shutdown of several civilian grids on the surface. Lin authorized the blackouts with grim certainty. War takes power, he told the mayor of Lyra City. This war more than most. The mayor nodded, face shadowed by candlelight. We'll make do. Just win. Zhurak morale began to fray. Their tactical models, long considered unassailable, no longer provided consistent outcomes. Ships sent to patrol returned reporting different data. AI consensus engines contradicted each other. Even veteran commanders began to distrust their own instruments. One destroyer, the Yerrick Skin, opened fire on its own recon drone, believing it had been subverted. Another captain ordered a retreat from an area the sensors reported was empty, citing a Phantom Fleet signature. On board the VA Corridor, Fleet Master Varn issued a new directive. Purge all assumptions. Revert to line-of-sight targeting. Abandon strategic modeling. It was a stunning move, a tacit admission that the Imperium's best systems had been compromised. Echelon Prime had turned the Zhurak strength into a liability. In the war room, Lin watched the shift with silent satisfaction. They're blind now, Hesper whispered. Not blind, he corrected, but paranoid. They'll hesitate. They'll second-guess. That's when we take pieces off the board. He turned to the comms technician. Bring up target cluster Theta 7. Prep for surgical strikes. Quiet ones. Using the Ghost Fleet? Lin shook his head. No, he said. Now we send real ships. The Mirage Net shimmered one last time, and then went dark. At exactly 0500 hours, Echelon Prime stopped pretending. After 12 days of deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare, the Zhurak Imperium finally saw what they had come for, a clear shot. The Ghost Fleet evaporated from their sensors, the jamming signals faded, and the orbital field went silent. To the Zhurak, it was a sign. The humans had finally run out of tricks. Fleet Master Varn didn't hesitate. Prepare the assault wings. Launch all fast strike units. We take the planet now. The Imperium fleet began to descend from orbit like a storm front. Rows of black, blade-like ships sweeping in formation, their plasma thrusters glowing like dying suns. Hundreds of fighters burst from carrier bays, flanking the main columns in coordinated sweeps. From the planet below, it looked like a rain of knives. In the war room on Echelon Prime, General Lin watched the feed with stillness carved from stone. "They're coming hard," Hesper said. Her voice was tight but calm. "They think we're broken," Lin replied. "Let's make sure they feel right at home." He activated the final sequence of Phase 4. Across Echelon Prime's orbit, the quiet became motion. The planet's orbital junk, thousands of tons of dead metal, old shipping containers, fractured station modules, and forgotten mining rigs, began to move. Tethered together by thin magnetic lines, they formed makeshift barriers, fields of debris thick enough to scatter sensor signals and mess with trajectory guidance. Lin had spent days turning orbital garbage into walls of chaos. And now, the Zhurak were flying straight into them. The first impact came minutes into the assault run. A Zhurak escort cruiser veered off formation to avoid what it thought was a collapsing satellite. Instead, it clipped a tethered cluster of industrial fuel tanks, each rigged to detonate on contact. The explosion tore the cruiser in half, the fireball lighting up low orbit like a miniature nova. Then the real killing field began. Mining platforms that once extracted helium, 3 were now refitted with kinetic spike launchers. Unguided projectiles shot out at insane velocities, like giant railgun slugs. Their targeting was primitive, but when fired into a bottlenecked assault lane, they didn't need to be accurate. 2 more Zhurak destroyers fell before they even reached weapons range. Still, the rest pressed forward. "Switch to Phase 4B, Lin ordered. In the command center, techs flipped switches on a separate system. Old fusion core regulators wired together into a synchronized signal scrambler. The blast was invisible, but the result was instantaneous. Zhurak fighters lost communication with their command carriers. Orders stopped. Formation broke. And into that confusion, Lin unleashed his fleet. A real fleet. Not many ships. Only 9, in fact. But each one had been repaired, reinforced, and modified with scavenged tech and desperation. Most were former haulers, now bearing missile pods or plasma lances welded from mining lasers. Ugly, slow, but deadly in close range. They emerged from the shadows of Echelon Prime's polar orbit, concealed behind the largest junk field, and dove into the chaos below. Their commander, Captain Rena Sol, led the charge. "Engage the crippled flank," she barked over comms. "Aim for their engines. No hero plays." The ragtag human ships struck like a hammer. Not because of overwhelming firepower, but because the Zhurak didn't expect resistance from real, live ships anymore. The element of surprise belonged to the defenders now. Inside the VA Corridor, Fleetmaster Varn stood at the edge of madness. His battle grid was a mess of red alerts and contradictory telemetry. Ships were going dark for no explainable reason. His fighters weren't responding, and his command AI had entered an error loop, unable to reconcile the difference between visible targets and expected outcomes. "This is chaos," one of his commanders shouted. "No," Varn growled. "This is a trap. It's always been a trap." He turned to his NAV officer. "Signal to right flank. Order retreat to outer orbit." The officer blinked. "Sir, right flank is gone. Gone. Erased by mining drones armed with self-replicating EMP bombs." Another report came through. 3 capital ships had been boarded by human strike teams using grapplers and zero-G suits. Most were kamikaze crews, sacrificing themselves just to take one enemy vessel offline. They weren't soldiers. They were miners, engineers, civilians, fighting with knives and explosives and raw fury. The Zhurak had trained for war, but they hadn't trained for this. On the surface of Echelon Prime, sirens wailed across cities as debris began falling from destroyed ships above. Emergency response crews scrambled to intercept falling wreckage, while citizens huddled in bunkers, listening to the distant rumble of war in the heavens. One ship, a Zhurak gunboat on fire and tumbling, broke the atmosphere in a slow arc of flame, and crash-landed in the western desert. Dozens of civilians saw it streak overhead and cheered. Even without understanding the battle, they understood what it meant. The enemy was falling. Back in the war room, Lin watched the battle play out like a game nearing its final moves. He made no grand speeches, no shouts of victory, just quiet adjustments. "Have Soul Squad fall back," he said. "Let the Zhurak regroup around their dreadnought." That's when we cut the cord. Hesper's eyes widened. "You're not actually going to?" Lin nodded. "Yes. Detonate the Skyhook." The Skyhook orbital elevator had been dormant for 2 years, officially shut down for structural instability. Unofficially, Lin had spent the last 5 days planting charges along its spine. When the order went through, a signal pulsed upward along the cable. A second later, the carbon fiber tether snapped. A section of the elevator, kilometers long, slammed into the orbiting core, which had been hijacked by Lin's demolition crews and repurposed as a massive kinetic missile. It drifted slowly at first, then it accelerated. The VA core there had time to launch countermeasures, but not enough to avoid collision. The massive orbital core hit the dreadnought's side like a hammer hitting glass. The Zhurak flagship tore open like a can under pressure. Its core ignited. Then it exploded violently, brilliantly, scattering black metal across the sky. A long silence followed. On both sides. No new orders. No new movements. The Zhurak fleet, what remained of it, floated in disarray. Engines damaged. Systems failing. Command structure shattered. And down on Echelon Prime, in a war room lit by flickering emergency lights, General Rafael Lin closed his eyes for a moment. He never felt more tired. The Zhurak finally sent another message. "This is Acting Commander Turan of the 3rd Assault Wing. We request terms." Lin opened the comm channel himself. "Your terms are simple. You leave. You don't come back. You tell your Imperium that Echelon Prime is not prey. And if we refuse..." Lin looked directly into the camera. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of everything that had come before. "Then we'll show the rest of your fleet what happened to your dreadnought." A long pause. Then silence. Then withdrawal. For the first time in 2 weeks, the skies above Echelon Prime were silent. No alarms. No explosions. No shadows creeping across the stars. Just the slow return of normalcy and the quiet reckoning of survival. General Rafael Lin stood on the balcony of the Central Command Dome, overlooking a city that looked both familiar and forever changed. The skyline was intact, mostly. The people below moved with purpose again. But everything had a layer of soot, of silence, of what could have been. Behind him, the war room was still dimly lit. Emergency power lingered. Half the screens were dead, the others flickering with fragments of data feeds no longer needed. Commander Hesper joined him, her uniform unbuttoned at the collar, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. She handed him a cup of coffee, the real kind, somehow salvaged from the reserve stores. He accepted it with a tired nod. "They're really gone," she said, as if saying it again might make it more real. Lin sipped the coffee. "Bitter. Perfect. They're gone," he agreed. She leaned on the railing beside him. "You think they'll be back?" "Yes," he said without pause. "Not tomorrow. Not next month. But the Zhurak Imperium doesn't forget humiliation, especially not one written across the wreckage of their pride." "Then what do we do?" He didn't look at her. His gaze was on the rising sun creeping over the mountains. "We prepare," Lin said, "and we make sure they never forget why they lost." The official reports took days to compile. Earth Colonial Defense Council sent a delegation, weeks too late to assist, but just in time to witness the aftermath. Ambassador Sato arrived with speeches and media drones, eager to parade through the ruins and shake the general's hand. Lin stood for the photos, said the right things, then turned down the medals. "You earned this," Sato insisted, holding out the medal with the Earth Alliance insignia. "I earned 100 funerals," Lin said. "Give it to someone who needs reminding what war looks like." Sato blinked, unsure how to respond. Lin walked away. Echelon Prime's dead were honored in a quiet ceremony near the northern ridge. No flags, no trumpets, Just names read out over a calm line that echoed across every home, dome, and outpost on the planet. Miners, engineers, civilians, a few soldiers, and all heroes. The orbital graveyard still glowed faintly above, debris slowly decaying, drifting toward controlled burns in the upper atmosphere. Mira called it the Ring of Memory. So want to clear it. Lin ordered it preserved. We built our defense out of trash, he said. Now it's a monument. Azael and her signal team finally emerged from the comms bunker after 14 days underground. Her first request was a shower and something that isn't in tube form. Lin granted both, then sat with her on the hillside later that evening. You broke their machine thinking, he told her. Turned their smartest systems into scared little children. She smiled weakly. Yeah, but I think I fried a few of my own neurons doing it. Lin chuckled. Worth it. Azael looked up at the sky, then sideways at him. Think you'll stay? He didn't answer right away. I'm not sure, he said. They'll want me back on Earth. Advisory boards. Strategy councils. We're games. You don't want that? I didn't survive this to sit in a room with people who think war is clean. Azael nudged him. Then stay. We've got more broken satellites than working ones. You'll feel right at home. Captain Renasol's remaining fleet, now down to 6 ships, was reassigned to planetary defense. Lin personally oversaw the construction of a new orbital command platform using salvaged Zhurak hull pieces. If they come back, Sol said during one inspection, we'll be ready. No, Lin replied. We'll be waiting. That's worse. Mira returned to her lab and began work on something new, an advanced decoy array based on a Mirage net. But this time, it wouldn't just project fake fleets. It would create entire fake colonies. Imagine them landing, she said excitedly, only to realize they've invaded an empty shell. You're getting devious, Lin said, admiring the blueprint. She grinned. I learned from the best. The Zhurak Imperium never issued a formal statement. They didn't acknowledge the loss. They didn't deny it either. What did change, however, was subtle and seismic. Zhurak patrols began avoiding neutral space. Smaller powers that had once feared the Imperium's wrath started negotiating trade routes with Earth. Colonial governors on distant outposts began invoking the Echelon Protocol, a term now whispered in strategy circles to describe asymmetric planetary defense through tactical misdirection. But more importantly, the galaxy now knew one simple truth. Human strategy was not to be underestimated, not because humans were stronger, but because they were desperate, because they were clever, because they would weaponize anything, junk, lies, silence, and even fear itself to survive. Weeks later, as repairs continued and Echelon Prime began to breathe again, Lin visited the War Memorial. A black stone monolith stood on the southern ridge, etched with names. He stood there alone for a long time. Then he added one more name at the base. Hope. Not a person, not a title, just a reminder that it was real, that it had survived. As he turned to leave, a young cadet ran up behind him, breathless, clutching a datapad. Sir, the cadet said, eyes wide. There's a fleet approaching the neutral zone. Unidentified. Lin didn't blink. Sound the alert, he said. Activate the Mirage net and tell the fleet. He looked up at the stars. Tell them this time we go hunting,